You're listening to the Current Reality Podcast, where we talk about staying anchored in biblical reality within the current of modern culture. I'm Michael Clary. With me is Wade Thomas, and we work for Christ the King Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. Actually, I won't have to. I need to change these notes.
Plus, I wonder if they can hear the new logo as you say Christ the King.
I'm sure they can.
They hear
I'm sure
the
new logo is just it's an audible thing. It's new technology, but all right. We work for Christ the King Church in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, which makes this podcast possible. And Wade, I'll kick it over to you. What do you got for us today?
All right. So this one, I'll set the table a little bit. You've probably already seen the title, I would imagine, Father Wounds and Mother Wounds. I'm going to assume that in 2025 America, probably half of our listeners right now that are hearing my voice have some form of a wound from a sinful or absent father or mother. You go back 250 years, 300 years, 500 years, you would have like physically abusive dads and drunk dads. But there would, especially within the West, within the Christian world, there was the middle of the bell curve was much more solid. Mom is home, dad is home. Dad disciplines, mom takes care of the home. There, obviously there are always going to be sinful imperfections in that middle of the bell curve, but that was much more normal. Whereas today, you've got, a third of kids, or 23% of kids I'll get to, being raised in single parent households. It's normal. It's almost held up as like a good thing. Like, there'll be
progress.
There'll be like I'm sure almost, every year some Oscar worthy movie that is about a single mom and how great it is that she does what she does. Like that kind of thing is just normal. Not to mention all the families where kids are being raised by two men or two women aping a marriage. So you've got that. You've also got feminism having created a reality of almost half of families have both parents working. Almost half of families where there are two parents having both parents working. A lot of you are going to have some ache, I am sure, from either absent dad or truly wicked dad, or absent mom or truly wicked mom. And so what we want to do here is expose that reality. If everybody in America had a kind of cancer, or half of America had a kind of cancer, it'd be good to talk about it. Step one is seems like a lot of us are getting tumors on the side of our faces. Like, let's talk about it. And then secondly, to try to treat that disease, that sickness.
Yeah.
So that's it. Father wounds and mother wounds.
So we're talking about the wounds of not having the sort of home environment growing up that God made us to experience.
God designed the world such when he made Adam and Eve, he gave them particular tasks. Eve's name reflects the fact that she was the mother of all the living, beautifying of that garden and producing children and making that garden hospitable and life-giving was essential to who she was. That is an essential feature of womanhood. There may be individual women who through the fall or through the gift of celibacy aren't called to it. That kind of woman exists, but an essential feature of womanhood, I'm going to take the rib out of this guy and make this thing, was life-giving motherhood and beautifying of the garden. An essential feature of manhood was going out and taking dominion, naming the animals, producing children, being a father. And then later on in scripture, you see discipline and instruction of those in the household and making sure they are godly in the household. When you don't have that, you will produce wounds. You will produce aches. The world was made such that children and the people in a household need those two things. They need them both. They need the soprano and the bass. They need both of those features. And so whenever you have households that are lacking one or both, God forbid both, you're going to have serious, to use a word that is overused in our day, trauma.
Yeah.
You're going to have serious scars.
Well, I mean, wound is a good word. I mean, trauma could be, the word trauma seems like it's a word that is meant to imply, pain, but an extraordinary amount.
Yeah.
But
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. So a trauma, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, that means that there was something that was so earth-shattering and life-altering, a type of pain that you're never the same.
Get an arm blown off or something.
Yeah, and that exists. That's real. But now we talk about trauma. If your Netflix subscription expires and your credit card is, whatever. It's like we use the word trauma so flippantly now. But I think like the word wound or pain, something like that does say, it's like there is a real cost to not having the sort of normal home environment that we're meant to have. And the examples that we'll get into today, it's just like we can demonstrate this through statistics, but also through stories. Yeah. And the thing is, like, if you put your ideology aside, everybody knows.
You know this.
Everybody knows
Walk
this.
through a prison and talk to the guys there about dad. I mean, if you have been alive on planet Earth for more than 15 minutes and you can be somewhat objective, not having good, present, godly dad, not having good, present, godly mom will yield some sort of negative result.
For sure.
It just will.
Or like a divorced family to where you might have moms, but you have two moms. You have a stepmom and a real mom and a stepdad and a real dad. And then everybody might be nice people, but there is a cost associated with that is not often acknowledged because it goes against the prevailing ideologies that's common in our culture.
You may have to make the best of that, but the reality is divorce is not good for kids, period.
Amen.
It's not. There are men and women who are cheated on, their wife or husband committed adultery, or who are abandoned, in which case the Bible would allow for divorce. But even in those cases, divorce isn't good for kids. And the innocent party could tell you that. It's not good for my kids that my husband or wife committed adultery or left. And then we got divorced. So maybe a good distinction between trauma and actual trauma, not like the weaponized version the left uses, but there are kids who are literally, especially in the third world, this doesn't happen as much here, but there are kids who are literally abandoned by a mom and or dad, just left. In India, I know they have pods that you can like leave a kid in if you don't want them, or sometimes just left in the road, left at a orphanage, left at a clinic. Okay, that, even though the kid's not going to remember it, probably just physiologically will yield some like trauma, or a kid who's beaten half to death by his parents and then put in foster care. That can happen domestically.
And since little babies can't speak, it's not like they could say, hey, that hurt me right now.
Right.
And they don't have enough knowledge or life experience to be able to even know. But it's like just at the very most fundamental instinctual level, it does do a harm that they may never even realize. It just a harm that is at the back of their, in the back of deep recesses of their soul, where they were abandoned. And then, of course, since they can't talk about it, we think, oh, they're fine. The kid's fine. Look at that kid. He's happy. Running around having a good time. He's fine.
But you're kidding yourself if you think that doesn't actually have some kind of impact. And the abuse one, that does happen quite a bit. There's a lady in our homeschool co-op. They've adopted 6 kids domestically. And I'm like, I don't know all the stories, but they were in foster care for a reason. And there's almost always going to be, especially, taking a 5 or 8 or 10-year-old out of a home and then making them available for permanent adoption by somebody else. Something really bad happened. So that would be like trauma, an actual, in the physical analogy, getting your arm blown off or your leg blown off in some kind of explosion. But the other one that is common, and I think probably, like I said, half of our listeners I would expect have suffered, is mom was not around much. Dad was not around much or at all. Mom did not make a home. Mom went to work every day for 40, 50 hours a week. And again, there's some households where mom is by herself. She's going to have to do that. But there's a cost associated to it.
There is.
And the households where she doesn't have to do that, she did that because we wanted to make $200,000 a year so that we could live in this nice subdivision. The kid is going to feel that. We are not helping anybody by normalizing that and acting like there isn't a cost to that. So that's kind of what we want to get into. Okay, so here's some taste of crazy. I've got one on the sort of bad dad side, bad father side, and then 2 on the career woman sort of side, absent mom kind of side. The dad one is an obvious one. If you're, a listener who's online at all, you'll know who Andrew Tate is. But he is.
Do people know who he is?
Maybe not. Okay, so if you are on Twitter at all or X at all, if that's your space, you probably have some sense of who he is. I know
is YouTube, is that kind of where
he's on YouTube a ton, his stuff. So, I mean, he has like a massively devoted, loyal subculture. I mean, there are, I don't know the head count, but it seems to me likely that it's probably in America, 1 million plus under 25-year-old guys who just, like, there's a subculture even surrounding his dad. So he has this thing where he talks about how his father, who I'm pretty sure it seems like definitely not a good man, like not a sexually faithful man to one woman. And his dad was not around much. His dad was not like the model of Christian fatherhood, being in the home. So his dad physically, beat him and made him like get up in the middle of the night and play chess. Or his dad was like a professional chess, like a chess grandmaster, would make Andrew play in the middle of the night chess. And so Andrew holds up these things as like, this is what a dad should be. A dad does not need to be, he'll say, Andrew Tate will say, dad doesn't need to be changing diapers. Dad doesn't need to be in the home. Dad needs to just be high impact. So I don't know exactly how many, but Andrew Tate has fathered multiple children by multiple women. And he basically says that's good. That it's almost like a silverback gorilla mindset. Like father, have a harem, have a troop of women, father children by all of them, and then once in a while smack them around so that they can go out into the world and do the same thing if they're boys, or just be baby factories if they're women. So, I mean, like it's very Darwinian, even though he's a Muslim, a supposed Muslim. I mean, I doubt.
But that was a recent thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was recent-ish. And I would imagine his flavor of Islam is probably pretty like black Islam or something. It's not like normal Sunni or Shia Islam. Yeah. So what I was going to say about the dad was there's even a subculture surrounding his dad. So some of his like Tate, I don't even know what they call themselves, Tate Army or whatever. They hold up Andrew Tate's father, who seems to my knowledge to be an incredibly wicked man. They hold him up as sort of like a John the Baptist-like figure who was the forerunner for Andrew Tate. Oh, wow. So anyways, Andrew Tate is not, there's a kind of guy who will go after Andrew Tate who is just like, look at me, cool kids. I go after the chauvinist too.
As in criticize?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a kind of criticizing of Andrew Tate that is merely theatrical and performative. Look at me, feminists. I hate the bad men too. And that's not what we're doing. But he does have like a pretty big footprint in young male America.
Well, I think some of these performative critics would criticize him for different reasons than we would.
Yeah.
It's like what they're criticizing about him it's more masculinity in general, and to the extent to which he represents a distorted version of it. But what they hate is masculinity. Yeah. Whereas what we hate is not masculinity, but a perverted and distorted masculinity. And so both are attacking the target, but for different reasons. So
yeah, that's a good way to put it. So a lot of I don't have anything to add to that. That's very good. That's a good way to put it. Okay, here's the tweet that it had 8.3 million impressions. And you could tell me, because I'm not quite as plugged into what it takes to be ratioed, but it doesn't seem to me like this is him being ratioed. It got 28,000 likes and 7.1 thousand comments. Yeah. So ratio, you'd have to have more comments than likes, right?
Typically, yeah.
Okay. Or pretty close.
Yeah.
So in other words, this tweet that I'm about to read to you it did not get slammed down. Like it made a pretty big dent. And I think there are a lot of young men who found it compelling. Here it was. If all your children come from one woman, you are not a conqueror. And this is a part of his shtick. I can't even tell, honestly, does he actually believe his garbage? Or is he just trying to get rich from appealing to something? But the fact that he is appealing is a part of the problem.
Well, his popularity comes from the fact that nobody speaks this way. And he's speaking He's addressing, so he's countercultural. And so some people are going to be drawn to that just because it's provocative and countercultural, but not counterculture in a way that is true and good. But it is just against the evil of feminism, which we would also be against. So he doesn't kind of genuflect to women the way so much of our culture does now. And so he's got this, like, I'm not going to worship women. I'm not going to be ruled and long-housed and subdued by women. I'm going to be a man. I want to be a conquering man. And there is some ring of truth about that, not in a subjugating women the way he's doing, but in a way that it's like men are made to rule and to conquer and to be strong and, these sort of things, but strong and good and conquering for good purposes, righteously in a godly way. And so I think he's tapping into something that is a real need. And maybe this is where you're wanting to head with this. It's like he is giving fatherly type instruction, but more in a, gosh, I don't know the best way to put it here. It's like, it's not like it's fatherly, but it's the kind of instruction that boys need from their dads, which is, let me tell you about the way women are, son. Let me tell you about how to talk to a woman, how to court a woman, how to marry a woman, like how to treat her.
Yeah.
And so there's a need for people to talk about men and women as though men and women truly are different. The way we relate to each other needs to reflect that fact. There are skills that we learn and acquire. So like talking to a woman is not just talking to a fellow human being. The way you talk to a woman is going to have some subtleties and differences than the way you would talk to another man. And Tate he's speaking to a reality that is true, but the things he is saying is not true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, so basically, here's the irony. He only has an audience because there are men with father hunger. But the thing he's saying will produce more father hunger. So he is only appealing to men because there's lots of guys who did not have a father tell them true things about the world in a fatherly way. Like Andrew Tate has zero appeal to me. There is not a universe in which Andrew Tate would have appeal to me. And it is not because I am intrinsically great. I'm dead serious. It has nothing to do with my own inherent virtue. It has one instrumental cause. God is the ultimate cause, but it has one instrumental cause. My dad. I don't need Andrew Tate. He has no appeal.
Yeah.
If I need to know how the world works, even at 39 years old, I will call my dad. I almost said his phone number out loud, just because I haven't memorized. There's like 4 phone numbers I haven't memorized. His is one. I will call my dad, and my dad will give me advice because my dad is a father. So Andrew Tate is appealing to guys who did not have that, who did not have a dad who intentionally, lovingly, in a masculine way, told them how the world works. This is how you get a job. This is how you sit up straight. This is how you shake a hand. This is how you start a car. This is how you anything. This is how you have conflict. But ironically, his Darwinian pseudo-masculine garbage will produce more father hunger.
Yeah.
He's got, 7, 8 kids by lots of women. He's telling dudes to do the same thing. He's telling men to do the same thing, to go out like, chimpanzees or something and just produce progeny and run away. Mm-hmm. And every single one of those men that they produce is going to have the same.
Those kids are going to be fathers.
Exactly. And so they're going to be subject to more Andrew Tates. Yeah. So that's the irony of it. Okay. Couple from women here. These are on women who are full-time in the workforce and had children. These are a couple of quotes from an article I was reading. This is from Lexi Ayasa, founder and CEO of the Confidence Company, which is like a gut health pharmaceutical type company, it seems to me. Anyway, she says, my time is precious. As a new mom, baby comes first, but as a founder, my other baby, my company, also needs a tremendous amount of my time. It's a very delicate balance, and I've really needed to compartmentalize. Having one foot in and one foot out with parenting doesn't work. Becoming a parent has forced me to focus on what is in front of me at the exact moment and being extremely efficient with my time when I have it. It's kind of, it seems to me to be talking out of both sides of your mouth to say, I have to compartmentalize. It's a very delicate balance. Having one foot in, one foot out doesn't work.
I mean, like, she's talking about a baby, but suppose that baby were 13 years old.
Yeah.
And kids like, Mom, can you come to my ball game? Can you come to my recital? Whatever it is that he's into. It's like, well, hon, I have to compartmentalize and prioritize my time. And we've got deadlines, quarter sales reports are due. So I'm not gonna be able to make that one, but it's because it's more important. And I've optimized my time. I'm extremely efficient with it. That hurts that child, because that child, well, they will see that as a reflection of their value. And a child, it is just something so natural and basic to, the human soul.
Yeah.
Is we were meant to have parents that were attentive to our needs and took care of us. And if they weren't able to do something, then it's for something worthwhile. And for a mother especially, it's like, mother is present. That is something that's essential to motherhood. And it's not like, what does mom typically do? Well, mom, folds the laundry and, cooks the meals and does the grocery shopping and helps with the homework. Well, you can outsource all of those things.
Yeah.
You can like, okay, we've got a nanny that's going to do all, the homework and the shopping and the food and all that. And then I'll just be there for a couple hours at dinner time. It's like, well, the presence of the mother, the fact that she is the one that is doing those things, is so important to a child. And it, as you said earlier, sometimes it's unavoidable. We live in a fallen world with limited resources. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but when it is done electively, just because you want it to help pay for lifestyle choices, or you want it to be something that will kind of scratch a personal itch for success or career, then there are costs, and those costs are not small.
No, I had a thought while you were saying that. A mother is not a set of tasks. A mother is not a fembot. A mother.
When you said that, I think immediately of
from Jetsons.
No, Austin Powers.
Oh, it's been so long since I've seen. I don't even think I've seen the whole Austin Powers film, beginning to end. A mother is an embodied feminine soul, covenantally tied to those children. Mm-hmm. So everything she does, unlike some sort of stranger that you would pay $13 an hour to come in and do it, or $28 an hour to come in and do it, or whatever, or unlike some drone in the future that may do it, she is bringing her embodied feminine soul, which is covenantally tied to those children, to that task. There's a reason why your grandma's cookies taste better than Chips Ahoy. And it's not just the ingredients. There's a reason why grandma's house, mom's house, maybe even great-grandma's house, if you're blessed enough, feels different at Christmas than if you just went to some swanky hotel that had an equally beautiful Christmas tree.
Yeah, and it's like, yes, because it's not just, it's decorated with red and green for Christmas time. It is her tastes, her preferences. If it's, kind of her gaudy trinkets that's all over the place, whatever it is, it's like you walk into a house, it smells like things that she likes and prefers. And it's, like my wife, she likes to light candles and come to the house, and I can tell whenever I come home and there's a candle lit, that tells me something about her mood, about what she's wanting to create an environment for the rest of our family. And I can light a candle myself, but I like walking into an environment that is created by her, and it makes it more special and more beautiful. And you cannot abstract that, especially whenever people complain about, making sandwiches, I could be a CEO. I've got the capability of that, but here I am making sandwiches for kids. And I'm like, you can't just abstract that and assign a dollar value to it, because then you will inevitably conclude, well, this is minimum wage labor.
Right.
But it's not making sandwiches. It's you are the mother feeding your children, and that's priceless.
Yes, that is a falser way to put it than the way I would put it, which is you can make food that will keep your children alive and remind them of what the world really is through your feminine hands. Or you can be in some boardroom typing up reports on Microsoft Excel and talking about them. See, now I've hollowed out the one and packed the other with meaning, but that's actually closer to reality because the shape of motherhood is actually a more integral shape to the world God actually made than being a CEO. He did not in the garden make Adam and a short CEO. He made a husband and wife who were called to be a father and mother and do specific things in subduing the earth and beautifying a garden.
Yeah.
Motherhood is more essential to that shape than being an executive. Okay, just one more. This is Anna Bonangle, founder of Nourish Life Nutrition, LLC. Although I had a climbing career in corporate wellness, I had also wanted to be a mom. I anticipated that I would want to be a stay-at-home mom. The reality was quite the opposite. I grew even more dedicated to my career, but with a whole new entrepreneurial twist. Rather than losing interest in my work as I had anticipated, my drive for work only deepened. My drive for my work only deepened.
That's interesting. I wonder, did she say what it was that drove that?
No, not that I saw.
Deepening interest? Because I mean, I think like if you don't like your children, then you're going to want to get away from them and go to work.
Yeah. And there's there's something to expose there too. So we do advocate for what the Bible teaches about manhood and womanhood, and we will tie it a lot of times to the way God actually made most men and most women. Most women do desire this on some level, even if they don't want to admit it. And most men do desire being Adamic, and conquering, even if they don't want to admit it. But there will always be in a fallen world exceptions to that, and women who don't want what is actually good and godly for womanhood, and men who don't want what is good and godly for manhood. And at that point, I would say, okay, duty needs to kick in. C.S. Lewis described duty as a crutch that can carry you when your legs aren't working properly. So if you've got a man who's like, I don't know why. My dad wasn't there. I have naturally less testosterone. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm a victim of something or if it's my own sin, but I don't like all the masculine stuff, including just being assertive and going out into the world and conquering. Okay, then let's let duty carry you for a bit. Maybe it has to carry you for a long bit. We hope it doesn't have to carry you for the rest of your life, but let's let duty kick in. Similarly, okay, I'm a woman. I don't like babies. I like guys. I'm not called to celibacy. I want to get married or I want to, have romantic relationships, but I don't like babies. Well, okay, that's not an option. He did not make a world where you can have romance without children and that's okay. That's normal. So let's let duty carry you a bit.
It's interesting. Like duty is kind of training for your affections and desires that can cultivate.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in Horse and His Boy, the fourth Narnia book, Bree, the horse, I think brings up the point, like he doesn't have to have a bridle or anything because he's a sentient horse. He's one of the horses that Aslan gave a mind to, but he wears one anyways for the sake of the story and for the sake of passing himself off as a normal horse. I'm like, a horse that, in Bree's world, at least a horse that is all that a horse should be, he doesn't have to be steered that way. He knows where to go.
Yeah.
But until he gets there, put the bridle in my mouth. That's like duty. All right, lay of the land. Here's in a sentence what I'm saying. The last several generations have experienced a historically high level of father and mother hunger. We're experiencing a fatherhood and motherhood famine at the societal level. And by hunger, I do not mean hungering to be a mother and father. That obviously exists too. But what I'm talking about here is because of a variety of interconnected problems, there are millions of men and women, boys and girls in America right now who ache because of an absent or sinful dad or an absent or sinful mom. And I don't mean sinful in the normal sense. All moms and dads are sinful. I mean like particularly selfish or sinful.
Like sinful such that the child is deprived of typical things that that
Right.
our souls were meant to experience from a mother or father.
Yes. Sinful to such a degree that 300 years ago, you wrote the Scarlet Letter. You wrote a book about adultery, and it was just known, like, adultery could ruin your life. Like, it's a stigma you'll carry around for forever. And now adultery, open marriages, daddy watching porn, mommy watching, like, it's just normalized. And that kind of normalization of sin and defective, being a husband, being a wife, being a mother, being a father, is going to yield what we're seeing around us.
Yeah.
You can't normalize that level of bad motherhood, fatherhood, bad being a husband, being a wife, and ultimately normalize single parents and no fault divorce and things like that without it having consequences.
Well, so if you have a dad that didn't provide, that's what we're talking about. So it's like a guy who just would not do his fatherly duty to provide or to protect. There's no leadership. He's just a passive lump. That affects the child such that that child is missing something they needed their father to give them.
Yep.
And on the same token, a mother who is not very nurturing, if she's just cold and distant and like what a mother would naturally do is be life-giving presence.
Right.
To where you kind of expect your mother to dote on the children too much.
That's what you have to rein in. Like with a dad,
Yes.
you might have to rein in. You don't have to yell every time, Dad. You don't have to spank every.
So between a mom and dad, what you're getting is their particular strengths that being kind of kept in check and counterbalanced by one another. So the father's going to be typically, he's going to, if a typical father vice is to be too hard on his children because he wants them to be strong. And a typical feminine vice is to be too soft on the kids because she's like, wanting them to be happy. Yep. And when you only have the one and not the other, and that's what is happening now. You have, people raised without women who value femininity, or in single mother homes that have no father at all. You've got this kind of huge gaps, and those gaps can just be skills that you didn't learn, but more on the deeper level, these leave a mark on your soul. Yeah. But it's like there is some ache or hunger or famine or wound for what should have been there but isn't, and now that child is impoverished in some way.
Yeah.
And they carry that impoverishment into adulthood, and it manifests in things like, let's say somebody that, I'll bet you if you could find a moment of extreme uncharacteristic vulnerability from Andrew Tate, he would probably I would imagine if he were truly honest, he would acknowledge that a lot of this is living out the fact that he did not have a proper father growing up.
Yeah. It is as, so when you have a kid who's gone through physical, gaping physical trauma or has physical wounds or has a physical ailment, you're going to expect that is going to play out later in life. It's going to affect the kid, even if he or she overcomes it. It is no different here. You should expect that these wounds to the soul are going to play out later in life, even if the child is able to overcome it, which he or she will if he or she is in Christ. If he or she is in Christ, he or she will have the ultimate healing. The balm of Gilead will be applied beginning in this life and then ultimately in eternity. That said, it doesn't, if I was sexually abused or physically abused, it's not like the moment I become a Christian, boom, I'm better. And similarly here, if my mom, I think there's two that come up a lot with moms. One is the cold, distant thing, or the super career woman thing, which, if you don't know, listener, like I did not have, my mom, was a homemaker, but I've been in ministry for a bit. I've been an adult in human life for a bit. I've worked in multiple vocations. I have seen the result of super career woman mom in grown people.
Yeah.
That's one version of it. And then another version of it is that I've seen is very manipulative. Again, another word that gets thrown around too much, but I'm just going to use it. Narcissistic, self-involved, self-obsessed, selfish mom who never gets confronted because everybody's afraid of confronting feminine sins in our day and age. Both of those two happen. The male versions, I think we're pretty familiar with. Deadbeat dad actually exists. Physically abusive dad actually exists.
Right.
Wicked, sinful, should be confronted. Physically abusive, should go to jail. All those things true. The feminine ones, I think, it's not in polite society. It's not. You're not supposed to bring them up.
Yeah, I would add a third, perhaps, for the women or the mothers, is that it's a kind of a smothering helicopter mother type.
Yeah,
where
right.
it's just it is too much.
Yeah.
Where a mother can handicap her child by never letting them grow up and become independent.
You're right. That does happen a lot, especially in, I think, like suburban sort of, that happens quite a bit. I forgot about that one. So, let me give some numbers and some facts to help flesh this out a little bit. Okay. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 63.4 million children under 18 in the United States. So 63 million kids under 18 in the U.S. Only 44.4 million are in married couple families. And that's going to include, by the way, supposedly married gay families. So you could shave off a few of those, but only 44.4 million or 70% are in married couple families. 4.9 million kids are in a family with a male householder and no spouse present. Almost 5 million kids in the U.S. are in a family with a male householder and no spouse present. So unmarried dad figure. And 14.1 million kids are in a family with a female householder and no spouse present. 14.1 million. I mean, that's like the population of New York City. Kids living with a mom, living with a female adult who does not have a married, husband there. And then this is super depressing. According to Pew Research, we have in the United States the highest rate of single parent homes. So
in the world,
on planet Earth. You look at a place like Mali in Africa, which is, if memory serves, largely Islamic. So the Muslims shaming us. 1% of kids grow up in single parent homes in Mali. 5% in Israel. U.S., 23%. 23% of kids are living in single parent homes. Almost a quarter. And the fact that we're such still a largely religious and largely Christian in at least name country, and yet still that we have normalized this, and we have to stop. Some of you listening to me are bearing scars because Murphy Brown or whatever normalized.
Nobody's going to know what Murphy Brown is.
But I mean, okay, so here's a newer one. I mean, like, I'm not as big on movie or TV shows, but obviously we all remember Modern Family. I didn't watch it, but we know the concept there. But even like The Sixth Sense, I remember. She's a single mom. I don't think it's ever even explained why in the movie. And of course, it is admirable for a single mom to try to, help her kid. But the fact that like in movies and in TV shows and in commercials, it is almost held up as more virtuous to be a single mom than to be a homemaking married mom.
Yeah.
Is going to generationally yield results like this. You get what you valorize. You get more of what you valorize. And we have made normal and almost valorous being a single parent. Well, don't be surprised then when
you get more of
when you get 1 in 4 kids growing up in that kind of home. All right. So we have too many single parent households. We also have a crisis of babies being born to unmarried women. So according to a report on U.S. births published by the CDC in 2024, just listen to these for a second. 2024, U.S. government. 69.3% of black babies were born to unmarried women. 69.3% of black babies were born to unmarried women.
Wow.
I taught for a year when my wife and I were first married and we had a kid, our first daughter. I taught for 1 year in an inner city environment. And one of my students, 7th and 8th grade language arts, one of my students would always call my wife my girlfriend. And it took me a long time to realize that like the word wife is not in his vocabulary. to him, he's heard that word the way you and I might have heard, thermodynamics.
Yeah.
Like it's some term that refers to something that exists or existed somewhere. What is that going to yield when 7 out of 10 kids born in a subculture, in a community, don't have a dad? My dad is my mom's husband living with us.
And it's rare. I mean, it's actually pretty rare.
Right.
To have, according to this statistic, but just anecdotally from my own observation.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like you just don't see it very often.
Yep. And you are not loving anybody by being like, we can't talk about that. It's uncomfortable. You're not loving anybody by being scared into silence about that being a problem. Do you actually care about people with brown skin in your country? If you do, you will have to, like, this will matter to you. This will hit something in you. 53.2% of Hispanic babies and 27.1% of white babies born to unmarried women. And
so, that's a generation.
Yes.
Like almost an entire generation of black babies.
Yeah.
69.3%. So that means that whenever these babies are grown,
right,
and they are looking to, enter adulthood, enter romantic relationships or whatever.
What's normal? What
is normal? And it's like, there's so few living role models that they could look to say, it's like, oh, this is how you do it. And like you said earlier, there are exceptions, there are tragedies, there's divorce, there's being widowed, whatever. But it's like, well, I can look down the street and, my family and people that I know and grandma and grandpa, it's like, I know what the norm is because the norm is normal.
Yeah. My dad left, but there's a neighbor dad. He plays with his kids and they let me come over and play softball. Yeah. Well, what if there's no husband dad in the neighborhood?
Yeah. It's like you just haven't seen it. And so what you have is an entire generation that has lost the memory of even what that is. And then how do you reclaim that? The memory itself is a lifetime of experiences living in a certain environment where you see millions and millions of little micro encounters between man and woman, husband and wife, father and child, and so forth. And that's all lost. So to try to reclaim it, you're trying to it's like, let's say people 50 years ago, they went, they put a man on Mars or something like that. And it's like, well, all those people died, but they didn't pass down those skills. Well, the fact that it happened in the past does not mean we can replicate it today.
Right.
Those skills and tools and information would have had to have been passed down and internalized from the people who did it. You're not going to read about it in a book,
right,
and be able to reclaim.
That's right. That's a very good analogy. It comes through, it gets into the fabric of your soul through 1,000 Tuesdays.
Yeah.
When your dad came home from work and you guys wrestled.
Yeah.
It's not something like, oh, I watched a season of the old Cosby Show and now I understand.
Yeah.
It comes from lived experience. And so now we're going to have millions of black adolescents who have something to overcome. Yeah. And it's not something like, they talk about food deserts. Ironically, the neighborhood I was talking about where I taught, one of the things that I would regularly hear about was it being a food desert. And they finally got a grocery store I saw the other day locally here, which, okay, fine, that's a problem. But nobody talks about how it was a dad desert.
Yeah.
What's the bigger problem?
Yeah.
That you had to go an extra 5 miles to buy celery, or that you didn't have a present father?
And that's how deception works. It works sometimes by outright lies, but sometimes it works by putting all the focus on a truth that is less important.
Yes, exactly.
And the more important truth, perhaps the most important truth, is the one that isn't being talked about at all. So that whenever you think, what is the biggest problem in this neighborhood? It's a food desert.
Yeah.
And
you're like, really? Because I'm pretty sure the food desert is not the reason that a lot of these boys are joining gangs.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm pretty sure if I were to go to a federal penitentiary and just walk and ask the guys, be honest with me, tell me what was a part of you ending up here, I'm pretty sure none of them are going to say, well, my neighborhood was a food desert. Yeah. But I'll bet you 8 out of 10 of them that are honest will say, yeah, dad wasn't around. Okay, so we've got a crisis of babies being born to unmarried women. And again, I'm thinking of you, listener. I'm also thinking of people we all know, but like I know a lot of you will have been born or somehow connected to dad was not there. He was not my mom's husband or did not stay her husband. All right. We also have a crisis of too many people having children with multiple partners. From the Institute of Family Studies, in 2021, 1 in 4 couples in the United States who had a child together also had children by previous partners. 1 in 4 couples in the U.S. who had a child together also had children by other previous partners. These parents have divided loyalties because one or both have emotional ties and financial obligations to prior children, many of whom do not live with their biological father and mother. That is an unavoidable truth. It is an uncomfortable truth, especially when you are the innocent party, if you were deserted or something, but it is absolutely true. Tell me, you got married to somebody else, you have a child together, and you also have children with your other spouse, even if you were deserted or the other spouse committed adultery. And the children in that dynamic don't feel it.
It's interesting. It says the parents have divided loyalties because one or both have emotional ties and financial obligations to prior children. The financial obligation, it's an unfortunate reality. But there's no solution to it. But when you have a divorce or something like that, or just child support of some kind, it is the presumption is that you can quantify the father's absence in some monetary value.
Yep.
It's like, okay, there's no dad here, so we can offset that by
with
him paying
$3,800 a year.
You could pay $700 a month or whatever the going rate is these days, depending on his income. And it's like that is a drop in the bucket compared to the presence of a father in the home.
Right.
And stepfathers, stepmothers, they can be great. I have both right now.
We mean that they can be great. That is an actual statement. And yet, what do they know? What would a good stepmom or stepdad know?
You're not mom and you're not dad.
I am not mom or dad.
Yeah. There is, nor should they even try to be.
Right.
Because everybody knows that's not the reality, and there is no replacement for the real mom and real dad. And
you kid, you listener, are not sinful for feeling that as we say that.
Yeah. Well, I can speak from my own experience as a child. I had a stepmom, stepdad. I had a stepdad who has since passed away in the last year. And then my mother's married to another man who's my current stepdad. Current stepdad, current stepmom are great. Mm-hmm. Former stepdad was horrible. And there was always this awkward tension in our home of just like, he's trying to play a fatherly role in a way, but I just know he does not love me the way my real dad does. Yeah. And he doesn't care for me. And he's got some other interest other than what's best for me in mind.
And this was a bad stepdad. So not all stepdads would be like this, but
yeah, the best of stepdads will not try to replace the biological father. But in my case, this man was abusive. And I don't use that term lightly.
Yeah, he's legit.
Yeah, he was a cruel, tyrannical man. And that I remember. It's the kind of thing. It's like the kind of memories that I try to forget. I don't think about it. I don't try to remember it. I put them out of my mind, and it is as though they never happened for the most part.
Which, by the way, can be healthy. I don't think that's a bad thing. To say I'm not going to dwell on this and replay it. There are times when somebody needs to kind of you need to cope with things that's happened in your life and not just ignore them. In my case, I feel like I've dealt with them and I've forgiven as needed, and there's no benefit to dwelling on those things, but they did leave a mark, and the kind of mark that I think redemptively God has used to help me to want to become the best father that I can, absolutely,
and to avoid the sort of things that I saw in him. And there was a, and that's taken a long time to kind of sort all that out. But I mean, I guess that's a story for another time, but there is it's not as though these are irredeemable situations.
Correct.
But it was an obstacle I had to overcome. And there are kind of weaknesses in my life, things that I feel like are probably just kind of, scars that I still carry over, that, things that I'm still, these wounds that, still kind of affect who I am as a person, but in a way that I think God has used it to make me a better man in many ways as well.
Yeah.
And so but these things are very real. It's not like they're just stats, but these are human beings that have real impact in their lives. And that's the thing that is like, when I see these stats, I'm like, man, that's millions and millions and millions of people who are going to have these difficulties.
Yep. And government isn't going to fix them. Like the answer for these millions of kids is not going to come from either Joe Biden or Donald Trump's Oval Office desk. I mean, obviously we want government to uphold the good and government has a role, but I'm just saying there is no quick legislative fix for millions of boys and girls who did not get to sit on their dad's lap except for at visits 5 times a year. There's nothing Donald Trump can do to make you feel better about your stepdad.
Yeah.
And so my point is, we need to talk about how big the wound is, because you are not helped. And I mean you, Michael, but also you, listener. None of you who have these wounds are helped by us doing this whole, well, all families are equal song and dance. Mm-hmm. No, even if a divorce was lawful because somebody sinned, it's a real wound, and the kids in that marriage are going to feel that wound. And stepdad there is a good, godly Christian version of a stepdad.
Yeah.
But even that version, he ain't going to fix all of the wounds of the divorce.
Yeah.
And so we need to deal with it. We got to name that. And then pastorally and even like as neighbors, as coworkers, as just Christian church members, we have to help each other with this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a crisis of too many people having children with multiple partners. This is from a paper by a professor of sociology at University of North Carolina. Quote, among those aged 25 to 32, 32% of fathers and 38% of mothers have 2 or more children with multiple partners. Among those 25 to 32, a third of fathers and 38% of mothers have 2 or more kids with multiple partners. The more children a person has at younger ages, the more likely it seems that those children are by multiple partners. The prevalence of half brothers and half sisters across the American landscape is not good.
Yeah,
it's not good for anybody. Okay, we also have far too many households where the mother is not working at home. From the U.S. Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2023, among married couple families, 49.7%, just basically half, had both people in the marriage working. And they don't mean working the way you and I mean.
Working jobs.
Right. The wives at our church do work. Those of them who work at home, they do still work. They work their butts off, but they do it at home. No, they mean paid vocational work with a W-2. Basically half had both people in the marriage working. And the labor force participation rate for all mothers with children under 18, listen to this, the labor force participation rate for all mothers with children under 18, so this would include single moms and married moms, was 74%. You look at all the women in America who have kids under 18, 74% of them are working outside the home. And 80.1% of employed mothers worked full-time.
So 74% had some job.
Right.
Of that 74%, 80.1% were full-time. Okay.
So, I mean, you're talking well over half of just moms with kids under 18 are working full-time.
And the issue there is not you should not work. The issue is what the cost is.
Right.
It's like, well, who's taking care of the kids, who's educating the kids,
right?
Who's putting them down for their naps, and who's changing their diapers, and who's playing with them and singing to them, and is anybody,
right?
And probably they're going to be largely socialized by peers while being monitored by some kind of child care professional that is a ratio of maybe, I don't know, 7-to-1, 6-to-1, something like that, that is not a parent.
And is not covenantally tied to that kid.
Right.
It doesn't
And
matter
they're
how
paid.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how good Joan at ABC Daycare is. She ain't going to step in front of a train for your kid.
Yeah.
She ain't going to be buried next to your kid. She doesn't care as much as you care. She can't. It's not a problem with her.
Yeah. It's not her. That's right. It's not her fault. But but those experiences are so formative. I mean, it's like as you're talking, I just had this memory. I mean, I have these little faint memories as a child where I remember going to a few different daycare places, and it was like I would get off the school bus at so and so's house and go hang out there just until parents came pick me up after from school whenever they got off work, and I absolutely hated because I'm like, I don't know these people. I'm in a strange home. And I'm a child. I'm 6 years old, 7 years old, being in somebody else's home that I don't know.
Yep.
They don't know me.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't feel safe. I felt threatened. And I'm like, those are, I mean, it's good for a child to be in environments where they feel threatened, but for it to be manufactured experiences by the parents that it's for their good and to teach them.
Yeah. So mommy can go earn a paycheck so that we can buy a second new car.
Right. So, and that was the kind of thing not everybody may feel the same way in that same environment, but I know there was something that just seemed deeply unnatural and wrong about it that I didn't have words for as a kid. I knew I hated it. And now looking back and reflecting on it, I was like, man, like I have just a handful of really strong childhood memories. I don't have like this active, vivid memory of just, some people have a mind like a steel trap and they never forget a thing. They could tell you all kinds of stuff. For me, it's like, a lot of it is just a big blur, but it's like, I remember Docks Creek Road where this house was that I stayed in. And I was just like, I went there and I just kind of like sitting, looking out the window, just aching for the moment my parents would pick me up. And that is the experience of millions of children.
100%.
And it leaves and it changes them.
Yes. And there are listeners here. We're going to get into this, but there are listeners here who feel that ache. We have listeners, and I guarantee listeners, at least a few people who have that same ache. Mm-hmm. I had to be taken to this daycare. I had to be taken to this woman my parents knew. I had to be taken to this house that my parents heard of so that both my parents could go to work. And that ache in that kid, that fear in the initial young child, and then the ache downstream of it are not the child's fault. There's nothing wrong with you that you felt that way. That's what I want listeners to hear. If you have that, you suffered something at the hands of, at the best, a fallen situation or misguided parenting. At the worst, selfishness incubated by feminism. And it can be overcome. It can be healed. But I don't want kids suffering that.
Yeah.
I don't want kids feeling like you felt. So here, I got two things to say about, of course, there's no Bible verse that says it is sinful for a woman to have a paid job. And there's a reason. It's not inherently sinful. It isn't. So here's what I want you to ask yourself, listener. I'll read to you Titus 2:3-5 just quickly. And then I want you to ask, does working in a paid vocation as a wife work towards this that I'm going to read to you from God's word? Does it go with the grain for a mom of young children to be doing this? Or does it go against this? Does it go against this grain? Titus 2:3-5. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. There are all kinds of reasons that would be perfectly godly or in bounds for a woman to have a paid vocation. That said, at scale, at a societal level, Does it go with the grain of what I just read for it to be normal for women to hop in their Subaru, drive down to ABC Company, scan their key card, walk on up, work for 9 hours, and then go pick up the kids at the daycare? Does it go with the grain of what I just read for that to be normal, or against it? Come on. We know the answer. And secondly, I would say even just on a practical level, look at what we're producing. So we have normalized it. Half of households, you heard, half of households have married households have both parents working. Half of married households have both parents working. So that's what we're in. Do we like what it's producing? What do you think?
How's that working out for
right.
us?
So just on a purely pragmatic level. Okay, so there we go. Let's talk a little bit about what this does to the soul. All right, what this does to the soul. To have had an absent or deeply sinful father or mother can be overcome, but it is an affliction or a hardship that will typically be lifelong in some form or fashion. Like physical or sexual abuse, a child can heal and certainly can and will find the good life in Christ if he or she becomes a Christian. But just as we would never expect a kid who was abused in a sexual or physical way to be just totally and completely over it, as though it didn't even happen, we should not expect a fatherless or motherless kid, or a kid with a incredibly wicked or sinful father or mother, to be just as healthy and whole as the typical kid who had one or had both. So this is an affliction that in most cases will be felt to the kid's deathbed. So one example that you and I had heard about was Gene Hackman just died, phenomenal actor. My childhood, he was Lex Luthor.
Me too. Not many people. He doesn't get mentioned for that role very much.
Yeah, but that was that. If I pictured Lex Luthor as a kid, that was him. And he gave an interview, I think when he was, he had to be late 70s because he said it had been 65 years since it happened in the interview. But he gave an interview with the old in the actor's studio or inside the actor's studio guy, whatever his name was. And he talked about his dad deserting them. The guy asked him about it. Mm-hmm. And at 70 plus years old, he could not finish sentences. And Gene Hackman was no, sit under a tree and compose poetry guy. He was a Marine, I'm pretty sure. This was,
oh, really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Gene Hackman was in the Marines. This is a substantial man. And yet at 70 plus years old, he was choking up multiple times in talking about what had happened when he was, I think, a 13-year-old is what he said, when his dad deserted them.
Yeah, I saw that clip, and it was a pretty powerful thing to watch, because he was obviously emotional in a way that was not comfortable.
Yeah.
So actors, the great actors, if they wanted to fake emotion, I'm sure they could.
He didn't want to be.
He did not want to be emotional. It was something that erupted from within him that he probably would rather have hidden. But the questioner would just asking the right kind of questions to just hit on that nerve, to show this very human moment where he was pained by this relationship with his dad. And it's so many famous people.
Yeah.
People that are next level performers in whatever field, very often there is some father hunger within them, that they're being driven by the need for acceptance they never received from their father. And it drove them to excel in great ways, but in ways that it would have been better for them to have been motivated properly, or perhaps to even not have achieved as much, because the achievement came at great cost to other areas of their life. Mm-hmm.
How many of our recent presidents have had absent dads?
Who are you thinking of?
Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. I'm pretty sure, I don't want to say and be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the same was true for Reagan. Like, just dads not involved. Yeah. Dads not married to mom happily for 50 plus years or whatever.
I don't know much about presidents. I feel like I run into stories more often about actors, comedians comedians, a lot of times, I mean, the comedians can be some really very deeply wounded people. And if you ever read about Steve Martin and his relationship with his dad, Steve Martin's a brilliant guy.
Yeah. He's like a musician. He's like a writer.
He's a banjo player. He is a very talented man. And the way that he articulates his relationship with his father, very complicated. There's one story I remember hearing where, he was on the movie The Jerk. Remember that?
Yeah. He
kind of
it's like doesn't he? Is that the one where he thinks he's a black guy?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like his dad was mortified. His dad was embarrassed of him for the movie because it's the kind of movie that you watch it, it's the kind of movie that makes you feel embarrassed for the character because it's kind of like a Meet the Parents.
Yeah.
It's like this, your skin is crawling.
Michael Scott.
Yeah. Michael Scott will make you feel embarrassed. So it was that kind of performance, but it was well done and it was well received. It was a good performance. Who won an award for that performance? And Steve Martin told the story about just his dad, was just like, well, he's and then named some other actor that was better, but it's like, he said that in front of a lot of people. And it was like humiliating for Steve Martin to have been kind of, cut down to size from his father in front of his peers. Yeah. And he's just like, my dad's ashamed of me. And that's the kind of thing that, I mean, people will do incredible things to account for those sort of wounds in their heart.
Yeah. And the things that they do will not actually heal those wounds. So if I'm right about Bill Clinton, for instance, I'm pretty sure that is true, that his dad was not. I can almost guarantee you that if his dad was not involved at this moment, after having been president twice, he still feels that. His dad not being involved. Mm-hmm.
I just thought of the movie Inception. Have you seen the movie Inception?
Yeah.
There's Cillian Murphy is the character.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? It's all the way down to that bottom dream level.
Yes.
It's dad.
Yeah. So F. Murray Abraham plays the dad.
Yeah.
And the whole concept of the Inception is like, they wanted to embed this idea within his subconscious through, shared dreams and science fiction kind of stuff. But they're like, the way that they were going to accomplish this impossible mission was to embed this idea of this redemptive story of this relationship with his dad deep, deep, deep down into his subconscious, because he'd always felt like his dad wanted nothing to do with him.
When you say it like that, it kind of makes me feel bad for the Cillian Murphy character. That's not the way the movie plays it. Like, the movie plays it as like it's got a happy ending. But now that you say that, I'm like, well, wait a minute. This guy got false acceptance from a dream version of his dad.
Yes. Yeah. And that is the tragic irony of the story is it is like the watcher, the film watching audience knows his dad rejected him till his dying day.
Yeah.
But they wanted to get him to sell this company.
So they made him believe that
made him believe that, on some level in this dream, his father was like, I need you to sell this company so you can make your mark on the world because I believe in you, son, and I'm this hard, grizzled old man that can't quite express it. But here in this moment, and it was like, there was a little windmill type of thing, a little handheld windmill that was just like, it seemed like, oh, my dad really did care for me because he had this picture of this windmill and and they even talk about in the movie, it's like redemption stories are the most powerful ones. And that was more likely to accomplish their goal if they can implant this redemption story in his mind. But that just shows like how deep father wounds are.
Yeah.
It's like how much we crave and need approval from our dads. We need to know that we have a father that's present. He loves us. He's proud of us. He'll push us. But push us from a place of love and acceptance, not from a place of, I will only accept you if you perform well.
Yeah.
And that's what you get out of Andrew Tate.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
why he's such a messed up dude.
Yeah.
It's like it seems like he's got a chip on his shoulder, trying to prove himself. And for people that are moderately discerning, they see right through it.
Right.
Like
and
this is a pathetic act. But there's so many people who don't have that level of discernment because they didn't have fathers to teach them, and they gobble it up.
Yeah, so if you are accepted by your dad, a good fatherly, dad, Tate's shtick just rolls right off of you because you had my dad is in my corner. I have a masculine covenantally connected presence behind me. In Rocky, he needed Mickey. Yeah. If you had a good father, you've got your Mickey. I've got my trainer behind me. Just quick movie aside, now that you said that, I think now this is true after listening to you. I love Nolan, even though he can be heavy-handed, Christopher Nolan. But The Prestige ends with Hugh Jackman's character, spoiler alert, saying, the reason we all did this, the reason you and I were, you just didn't understand it, Christian Bale, is that the world really is hollow all the way through, or solid all the way through. There really isn't any magic. There really isn't. And if you can get the audience to believe it, then you've really accomplished something special. And that's how the movie ends. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's what he's doing in Inception too, is that Nolan, in his supposed atheism, is like, there really isn't a father figure. There really isn't any magic, but it is noble. Or it can be powerful to try to make yourself or make somebody else believe it.
Interesting.
Just interesting aside. Okay, fathers provide benevolent authority, stability, and discipline. When fatherhood is lacking, a child is likelier to feel unstable in the world. Good fathers prepare their children to take dominion in the world. That's what Adam's task was. Adam was the leader of the dominion mandate. Adam was the covenant head of the human family, which was to go out and subdue the earth and be fruitful and multiply. Fathers lead their households in taking dominion. And good fathers prepare their kids, their boys and their girls, to do that in masculine and feminine ways. They shape their boys and girls' strength, and they give them confidence and discipline. Both boys and girls, men and women, sons and daughters, should have strength and confidence and discipline. It will be a feminine or masculine strength, a feminine or masculine confidence. The primary way womanhood will take dominion is by being motherly and a feminine presence in their households and in their wider spheres of influence. The primary way men will do it is by conquering, subduing, and leading their households and in society. Without a dad, without a father, a child will have a deficit of genuine confidence and sense of their place in the world. And by the way, the victimhood mentality, being as prevalent as it is in America, is connected to this problem, is related to this problem. So where do you see a ton of victimhood mentality? In the black community. Mm-hmm. What did we just, 69 point whatever percent of kids, of babies in the black community are born to unmarried moms. Those two things are not unrelated. Mm-hmm. If I did not have a covenantally connected to me husband, father, man who is married to my mom, led our household, and stayed with her my entire life, and was present in my home, I'm going to be more prone to believe and or to believe a victimhood mentality, or almost want a victimhood mentality. Whereas, generally speaking, you find people whose dads were present, they don't feel like they themselves are victims.
Yeah, right.
They do not feel like they themselves are victims.
Well, victims are, by definition, not responsible for their actions.
Right. What does dad usually get his kids? What does a good dad usually get his?
Gets them to take responsibility.
Hey, you stole that from that store? Get in the car.
Yeah.
You're going to confess it to the security guy at the store. And a good mom, a lot of times, might even be like, oh, honey, because she's a mom, right? I mean, not always. A lot of moms would totally back that up. But I'm just saying there is a difference between dad and mom. We all know it. The stereotypes exist for a reason. They comport with reality. All right. Mothers provide warmth, beauty, and life. Where motherhood is lacking, a child is likelier to see his world as a colder, uglier, and sterile place. You should not watch Fight Club. You should not watch Fight Club. It's filled with lots of bad stuff. But I did years ago.
You hypocrite.
I am a hypocrite. And there is a scene in it, and I think it is a line from the book. The book was written by a gay man, but he's kind of a contrarian gay man. Yeah, Chuck, and I can't say his last name. It's like a Polish last name, like Pajunik or something. It's a Polish last name, I'm pretty sure, and it's Palanik, maybe Palanik. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that line is from the book too, but the movie.
What line?
The one that I'm about to say.
Okay.
it's something like, this is a generation of boys raised by women, as he's talking about the Fight Club. And, that movie, which is pretty bleak and Darwinian, and it in some ways sort of upholds masculinity, but it's also like, it's a depressing film in a lot of ways. I think it's hitting on something there. Men who are raised by women are typically raised by single women who therefore then had to go out and work in the workplace. And I think that's what I think he was referring to, single moms. I think he was saying like, a lot of these guys down here in this Fight Club were raised by single moms. Well, what does a single mom have to do? She has to go out and she has to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, work 2 jobs, whatever. Well, okay, if I didn't have her at home building a home, the world does feel much more bleak and ugly.
Yeah.
For a man who had a godly mom who was able to build a home, and that's where she focused her energy, he always in the back of his mind has a good ghost, a good specter of that home. That home base is kind of always this aroma, this sort of backdrop to his life. That's how a good, my wife was from a family that modeled this nigh to perfection. And all of the 4 grown children, their home of origin, the actual house and the things around the house and the presence of that, will to their dying day be a song that is just playing on repeat in their minds in a good way. They want to go home. They want to go home all the time. They want to go home once a week. They want to go home for every holiday. They want to be there. And it makes them feel like the world is a prettier place.
That's good. Yeah, that's. I think it is a good thing when people are drawn to home, and in my view, home is not so much the house. It is wherever mom is.
Yeah, that's good,
because mom she represents the home, and she's the one that makes the home. Mm-hmm. And before a child is born, she is a home physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there's always something homish about mom, and
even nursing, even after being born, it's like her body is his or her home.
Right. It's a place of nourishment. It's where you get fed. Mothers naturally, good moms want to feed people.
Yep.
And so I think it's if you have a good experience with mother, even if there's financial problems and not enough food and whatever, but the presence of a good mother can make home a pleasant place that can help. There will be some shielding of the unpleasantness of life by the mother who creates a home that is a refuge from it.
Yeah.
And that can make it like, I want to go home, but home represents safety to me. And in so many homes, like, these millions and millions of people that we've been talking about, for them, home is a place that is not stable. It's not secure. And that does create that child is deprived of the necessary security that we need to become healthy, mature adults if we didn't have it as a child. So a child that grows up without that stability, without that security of home, then I think it's got to be a contributing factor to the off the charts anxiety that everybody in modern life seems to feel. It's because we've been conditioned to kind of experience life to where there is no real home base. Mm-hmm. There is no place of refuge, because even when we go home itself is a somewhat threatening environment.
Yeah.
And that's a good mother will create the opposite of that. She'll create something that is safe and stable, that from which kids can launch. Yeah. And I think that's what's missing, and what, but you and I would advocate that we need to reclaim that as best we can in the modern church.
Yeah, absolutely. The book of Ruth, I think, is a good biblical example of this. Naomi, even in her bitterness, call me Mara, not Naomi anymore. The Lord's, mm-hmm. She makes a new home for her and Ruth together, really, both of them make a new home in Bethlehem when they come back to the land of God's people. And then Ruth makes a home for Boaz, unmarried, never had children, that, as far as text makes it, doesn't indicate has prior children or a marriage. Ruth makes a new home for Boaz, and Naomi is a part of that home with their child, her grandchild. Ruth is the heroine of that story, largely through her feminine faith creating a home. Mm-hmm. And Naomi is the sub-heroine for helping Ruth create a home.
Yeah.
Like that's the feminine hero story arc is there was no home here. Now there's a home here. Boaz was rich already. Like he was successful. You know what he didn't have? A home.
Yeah.
Now he's got Ruth and Obed and a mother-in-law. Anyway, good mothers beautify the garden of a home. They form a home base that stays in the child's heart and memory for a lifetime. Without one, a child is likelier to feel rootless and unsupported. We talked about father hunger a little bit. Gene Hackman, you've told me David Spade. Guys, if you can, he uses a bad word in it, but other than one F-bomb drop, there's a 3-minute video where David Spade talks with former Kansas City Chiefs and Atlanta Falcons tight end Tony Gonzalez, where he tells this story about like comedians supporting him, to some degree his mom and brother supporting him, and then at the end he brings up, and my dad started showing up when I got successful. And it's really, David does not tell it in a self-pitying way, but it's pretty, it's frustrating for him. Like I'm frustrated on his behalf. So we've talked about father hunger, but I do want to point out there are examples of mother hunger in your circles. There are a lot of men and women with some scars or deficits due to very selfish or proud mothers. And I think it's untalked about because feminism is so much the air we breathe that people are unfamiliar with and even afraid of calling out the sins of mothers. I am thankful to be surrounded by women who are not like this. It's just not like I tried to think before I even came in here. Like, do I know any women like this? Like not in our church, in my sort of closest friend circles. No, I don't think I know any. And my wife is certainly the polar opposite of this. In no small part because her mom is the polar opposite of this. So my wife is the most life-giving and selfless person I know. But I don't think my church or my circle is an accurate representation of American society at large. I think we have quite a few selfish and emotionally manipulative and cold, some combination of those or different women who are mothers. Yeah. And you, listener, I'm sure either know someone or might yourself be suffering from them. Okay, let me unmask the sophistry real quick. We're winding down. So this is where, we talk about ways that language or ideas are manipulated, are employed in a devious way to make something that is bad appear good or normal. In contemporary American life, we view children as an accessory to our own lives, not as the natural consequence of sex, whom we then have a lifelong duty towards. So for most of human history, sexual intercourse, you knew a natural consequence of me doing this will be children. Mm-hmm. And I have a duty towards those children. That is not the mindset of 20. You go just walk through any shopping center or whatever and just poll the 20 to 30 year olds. They don't think children are a natural consequence of sex. Sex is what I do. It's expression, it's fun, it's pleasurable, it's exciting. And so when you do that, you are going to end up with the separating sex and childbearing that way, which God did not design them to be separated, is going to produce a lot of single-parent households where kids are something you might get around to someday. They are a statement about you. Do I want kids? Do I not want kids? That's not how God made the world. Sex or children are a natural consequence of you not being celibate, of you not being a eunuch. Mm-hmm. So, and second thing we should be aware of, our stories and our cultural sensibilities in 2025 America act as though men and women are interchangeable. When you act like men and women are interchangeable, you will get less good fatherhood and motherhood.
That's right.
They're not. Parenting is not androgynous. Okay. Just one bit of historical Christian thinking here. This is from the Apostolic Constitutions about 400 years after Christ. You, fathers, educate your children in the Lord. Bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Do not be afraid to reprove them and to teach them wisdom and severity. For your corrections will not kill them. Rather, they will preserve them. When they reach an age appropriate for marriage, join them in wedlock. This is great common sense biblical counsel there from our fathers in the faith.
Who is that? Who wrote that?
So it's from the Apostolic Constitutions, which is sort of like a compendium of Christian. It would be sort of like, today you might have like a book with multiple authors in it,
Essays in honor of.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It was sort of like that. But historically Christian teaching. Okay, a couple, or just one really, log and spec. So this is something that we as Christians need to remove from our eyes. We have been too afraid of calling out the sins that can play into single motherhood. No Christian or pastor is afraid of calling out deadbeat dads, which is great. We should call out deadbeat dads. There's not one normal Christian minister whose palms sweat about doing a sermon or writing a blog post or whatever about calling out deadbeat dads. Is a pretty easy target. No one's going to be like, there's no deadbeat dad lobby that's going to come in and be like, excuse me, sir.
Right.
But almost all Christians and pastors are afraid of calling out the sins that can lead to single motherhood.
Before we hit record on this episode, we were talking about Andrew Tate, and just kind of like everybody, it's like hating on Andrew Tate is, you don't need to puff out your chest or anything. Cause like,
right.
it can be sort of a theatrical kind of courage.
Christianity Today will publish an anti-Andrew Tate article and they'll be just fine. And they won't lose a single subscriber.
And the thing is, like, he is a worthy target of scorn because he's a wicked man. And I think I asked the question, like, is there a female equivalent of it? It's just like, and the fact that I had to ask the question in the first place tells me it's like, maybe it's just my own ignorance, but you said the Call Her Daddy podcast, which is like the girl version of Andrew Tate. So it's like a podcasting sort of platform, somebody who is just like all of the evil excesses of women. And it's just like total promiscuity.
Sleep around, yeah.
And so the first time I'd even heard of this podcast was when Kamala Harris went on the podcast to promote her campaign.
Me too, actually. That was the first time I heard of it too.
But I'd never heard of her before, but I sure as heck had heard of Andrew Tate. And not just because I'm a man and I pay attention to male things, but just because he has been so routinely condemned by men. But I hear zero condemnations of whoever. I don't even know the woman's name.
No, Christians don't rebuke that. You are not going to see a Gospel Coalition or Christianity Today article rebuking her. It's not. It is acceptable and laudable and held up as a good thing to rebuke bad men.
Yeah.
It is seen as impolite and not desirable to rebuke bad women.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we don't know how to, and we're afraid to.
Yeah.
But I think both reasons are
right.
Both reasons contribute to the fact.
And if you love people, that can't be your driving motivation.
Yeah.
If you love actual people, you should not want there to be single moms. And I don't mean just single moms who were deserted by bad men. That happens. I mean, you should not want there to be promiscuous women who have children and then try to raise them themselves and act like nothing is bad with it. Nothing is wrong with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder about, I think we may have talked about this in a previous episode too, but just like, I'm pretty ignorant about literature, about the kind of books that women read.
It's a lot of emotional pornography.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotional pornography out there. Normalizing adultery, normalizing, basically you realize yourself through, illicit, sinful sexual activity. Very few of these are like The Notebook or something, where it's like, let me tell you this great story of marital love, or this cheesy, awful story of marital love that at least valorizes marital love. I mean, most of them are sexual liaisons that are unmarried. And it is good that we beat up actual pornography, and we should continue to with vociferously. But it is weird. There is almost nobody who will rebuke romance novels or anything. I'm like, just, you have to be able to spot, listener, the fact that we will call out male sins with zero qualification, and we will have sweaty palms and a fast heartbeat while we qualify to death our slight rebuke of feminine sins.
Yeah.
And that's not good for anybody. Okay, let me end with this. Our reason for hope. Here it is, listener. By God's grace, you can be the mom or dad you did not have. So if you grew up with and are still suffering from either an absent mom or dad, a dad who deserted the family or worked too much or was a drunk, a mom who worked too much or did not show you any feminine godliness, if you suffered that, by God's grace, you can be what they were not. There are many, Pastor Michael is an example of them, but there are many men in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are doing this right now. So we're on the third generation of feminism. So there are men who are older than you, women who are older than you, who are fighting this. And you can take courage from that. I really honestly do not have any idea what it is like to suffer from a wound of dad deserted me. Dad deserted our family. Mom was nothing but manipulative from start to finish. I know that is an affliction, that is a sting that will be with you to the end, probably. You can, if the Holy Spirit lives in you, you can overcome it and be for your children and for your husband or wife what you did not see or receive. God loves you and can do that for you.
Thank you for listening to the Current Reality Podcast. Feel free to send us some feedback at currentrealitypodcast@gmail.com. If you found this episode helpful, consider leaving us a positive review and sharing it with a friend. The Current Reality Podcast is brought to you by King's Domain in Cincinnati, Ohio.